What's the fastest you've ever gone from caring about someone to straight up loathing them? Story 1. At the time, had a little sister. She was graduating from college, and her college was not close by. It was a few states away and at least a 5-hour drive. We both loved the sister, but we weren't going to make it to her graduation. We couldn't afford a hotel for the weekend, and we couldn't take off from work to get there on time. She freaked out on us. It was the biggest tantrum I've seen an adult make. My girlfriend and I both assumed it wasn't that big of a deal, but seeing how much her sister freaked out, we reevaluated the situation. So we packed up quickly and drove through the night to get there. She told us we could sleep in her apartment that night, but that we need to get a hotel the following night. That was fine. We found something online for like $100 a night. We got to her place in record time. It was not even midnight. We felt like heroes for making up so quickly. We get to her apartment, and she won't let us in. She says she's already in bed, and we should have gotten there earlier if we wanted to take her up on her offer. So we're both exhausted, and we have nowhere to stay. I just wanted to turn around and go back home, but my girlfriend was a better person than me. Luckily, we had other friends in the city, and one was nice enough to give us their couches for the night. It's been like 15 years, and I assumed the sister was getting one last lay with a college hookup because I could not imagine any other scenario where she couldn't simply walk down 2 flights of stairs to open the door for us. I ended up marrying the girlfriend and still bring up this situation anytime she gets in a fight with her sister. It's usually, "I can't believe how selfish my sister is being." And I go, "You can't? Remember that time we drove to her college and she cuts me off. Of course, she also remembers it. When a college hookup is more important than your sister and her boyfriend who drove 5 hours to meet you. Ugh, that sounds like something straight out of a sitcom, really. Who expects that kind of behavior in real life? Thankfully, they didn't have to sleep in their car. I don't know what kind of temperature this city is or anything, but it definitely wouldn't have been the best thing. Story 2. I have a story that isn't of the cheating variety and made me lose any respect for 3 people at once. Late high school years. A friend in our group had invited everyone to hang out at his parents' house. We were supposed to agree on a time the day of, but people weren't answering my calls or messages or were really vague. It was almost 7 p.m., which was a couple of hours later than I'd figured, so I decided to drive over. Sent one guy a message saying no one's really answering, so I'll just go ring the friend's doorbell. So all of a sudden, the friend calls me and says he was caught up in something and the whole thing might be off. He'll let me know. Thing is, he called me when I was just parking in front of his house and had a clear view of almost everyone in my group in his house. I let the call go on for several minutes, watching him motion people to be quiet, doing the talking hand yada yada gesture, etc., without letting him know I was watching him, until the dude finally spotted my car. He then, very obviously, told everyone to hide because he thought I'd just pulled up, and one guy who also pretended to be my friend actually hit the ground together with his girlfriend to avoid being seen from the window. So those 3 people, 2 friends and the girlfriend of one I have absolutely zero respect for. Also, I have nothing to do with any of them anymore, so that's nice. Then again, I also very clearly saw one real friend tell the friend off. He also called me immediately and said to wait up. He'd rather hang out with me than those buttholes. 20 years later, we're still very close and effectively formed a new group of friends. So, big silver lining. I'm so glad your friend went with his gut and made the right decision to stick with you afterwards. I'd like to think I'd made that choice in your scenario. Sorry you had awful friends, mate. It's really good to have, well, in a way, I mean, it's bad that this situation happened, but to be able to have physical proof right there in front of you, it's a little heartbreaking, but at least you can make the decision to go on with your life. I'm glad this person decided that he'd rather spend time by himself than have to deal with fake friends, and good for that other person to stand up for him too. Story 3. Had made some plans with the girlfriend at the time for Valentine's Day. This was back in late high school. I'd called her on the phone a few hours before to reconfirm details, and she abruptly begged off because supposedly her parents were going to be having a date of their own later that evening, and so she was being assigned to take care of her grandma for the day. Her grandmother needed constant care, so it wasn't unusual for one of her parents to be taking a day to stay with her. She was supposed to leave pretty early in the afternoon and be with her all evening. So I decided that the least I could do was maybe drop off some flowers and chocolates in a basket and stuff, and so she'd have something nice waiting when she got back. Spent a bunch of money on getting something nice, showed up at her place around 5, expecting just her parents to be there, and not only was she the one to answer the door, I could clearly hear both parents chatting away in the background, and there was no grandmother to be seen. Turned out, she just didn't have the guts to bite the bullet and properly break up with me. She was just going to keep canceling until I got the picture or something. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I had a girlfriend that pulled this kind of stunt. We had dated for a while and then spent about a month apart, but still dating. When we came back to living in the same area, she kept finding excuses to not hang out. We eventually broke up, but it was miserable until then. I know there's another side to this story. There are some people who, when the breakup has happened, the other person has gotten scary and violent. I don't know the background of this. If this person had no reason to believe the other person could become crazy or something, what do you think? Do you think it was fear of violence or just straight up cowardice? Let me know. Story 4. Had a really great friend in high school. He was cool, but he's always trying to sell stuff to people in the hallways, like video games or pocket knives or sunglasses. After over a year of being friends with him, he came over to my house to hang out, and when he left, a bunch of my favorite video games were missing. I realized what was happening, and I had plans on forgiving him if he just fessed up and apologized. Instead, he got super defensive and angry, and I instantly lost any respect I had for the guy. I let one of my friends borrow some PS4 games and a controller. The 3 games were $60 each, and the controller was $65. He only asked to borrow them for a few days, as he only had access to a PS4 for that time. A few weeks go by, and I've forgotten about the games. But when I did finally ask, he just never replied. 2 years later, one of our mutual friends informed me that he sold them for weed money. Story 5. I worked for my stepmom with the intent that I would take over the business when she retired in a few years. I took more than a 50% pay cut and left my career of 10 years of managing and leading organizations to come work for her. Those few years came and went with her unable to even talk about a timeline for retirement. I spent years trying to fix processes and procedures around the office to make her life easier and to make the general workflow easier for all employees, but she was completely resistant to any change from the status quo, while simultaneously always complaining about how busy she was and how we just didn't have any good processes in place. I finally confronted her about her retirement timeline and put it in writing that I would be her succession plan. She balked at even putting together a plan for her retirement. I let her know that I really couldn't hang around if there weren't any prospects for advancement or pay increases. My wife secured a job in a new town, and I gave my stepmom a 6-month notice that we would be moving. I explained that I would be more than willing to help hire and train my replacement and finish formalizing all the procedures I had developed in my time there. She fired me the next business day. Curse that shrew. Story 6. 1-year friendship with this girl. I invited her over to my new apartment. She came over and wanted to gossip about her coworkers. When she paused, I tried to add into the conversation, make a joke, give reassurance, add a comment, etc., but she would immediately raise her voice and start talking over me. I kept getting angrier every time it happened until I was actually loathing her internally. She was so self-absorbed that she didn't notice I went from smiling and engaged to frowning while staring off into space. After 2+ hours of not being allowed to talk, I made up an excuse to kick her out of the apartment and then vowed to never see her again. Sounds like one of my current friends. Only has time to talk about herself. Doesn't care for my opinions unless it somehow contains her. Only asks about my life after she's run out of things to complain about. I've had a long way to go in my life about stuff like this. I would always be someone that would have to talk about myself a lot just to make sure I was heard. I kind of felt like I was usually ignored, so when I had a chance to talk, I would just keep going. I think I still have a ways to go, but I think at least now I can listen a whole lot better. It's a continual process. Story 7. Had a male bestie for more than 10 years. One night, I was upset and crying because I witnessed my friend expire at the beach a few weeks earlier. He stays over to comfort me and suggests he sleep over so I wouldn't be alone. He promised he wouldn't do anything. I believed him, so he held me while I cried myself to sleep. I wake up to him fingering me, without my consent, obviously. I lost my mind and told him off and kicked him out of my house. He came back a few days later to apologize, but I was so disgusted with him I told him to frack off and never talk to me again. I blocked him. I felt so disgusted and betrayed. That is physical shaming and assault and seriously fracked up. I'm so sorry you have to deal with such a terrible human. Story 8. Was at my wife's family Christmas gift exchange. My wife is estranged from her direct family, so this was all of the uncles, aunties, and cousins. There were multiple nieces and nephews running around having a good time. We all agreed to a white elephant exchange for the adults so we didn't have to buy a lot of gifts. We did that the night before and did the gifts for the kids in the morning. Morning rolls around and all the kids are opening gifts, except my son. None of those entitled butthats got him anything. He sat there and watched everyone else open multiple gifts, and it broke my heart to see him sitting there with nothing. Curse those people right up their stupid buttholes. Curse anyone who would do that to a kid. You have a beef with the adults, fine. Grown-ups can handle junk, but that kid doesn't need to be involved. It's never the kid's fault that some junk is going on in grown-up land. This made my blood boil. Story 9. Coworker had a dog who she let run free on her property. Said dog liked to chase cars. So it was only a matter of time and the dog was hit. Dog couldn't walk for 2 days and was dragging herself around for days after that. We told her to bring her to the vet, and she refused because it was too expensive. We pulled together the money and told her, bring your dang dog to the vet, and she did. The dog's bones in her legs and pelvis were shattered, and the dog had no chance of recovering. Coworker finally let the poor thing pass peacefully. So anyhow, it was $50 to put this dog to sleep. And since then, every time my coworker spends money on something frivolous and shows us novelty socks, collectibles, an expensive cake, another freaking pet, I think about how she decided bringing comfort to an expiring animal wasn't worth paying for. I don't know if I would ever stop hating that person. Hurting animals is non-comprehensive for me. I don't get it, especially if it's your own dog. Story 10. A friend at a bar tells some people we just met how her mother expired. Later in the night, I expressed my sympathy. Now she's without parents. She told me hush-hush a few years prior about how her father had passed. Wait, did I tell you back then that my dad expired? I thought I told you it was my mom. No, both my parents are still alive. When we were in uni, I just read in a book telling people a parent had expired is a good way to get sympathy. Fracking sociopath. What an utter post. Reminds me of a guy from my school who was in my acting class, and he used to pretend to break down and cry. Then when asked what was wrong, he would say, my mom or my dad expired. And after gathering a fair crowd, he'd laugh it off and say it was a joke. Yeah, man, hilarious. He did this multiple times with multiple groups of people.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 11. My mother was an alcoholic growing up. I used to take her side in all the fights she had with my dad. When I was at an older age, I realized she was using my dad. She had no job, and my dad, who was 64, was working his butt off to pay for my sister, me, and my parents. Then my dad said we didn't have enough money for something, and basically my mom said, "So, we're poor?" My parents later split up, and she found another boyfriend almost instantly. She still didn't have a job, so I figured out that she used my dad, then was using her boyfriend. Yeah, it was messed up. My mom does the same thing. She's been married 7 times. Sucked every one of them penniless. I've been no contact with her for 3 years now, but I bet my last dollar she's still not working and leeching off of some guy. Story 12. A coworker was talking to me about the issues he was having with his 12-year-old stepdaughter. Another coworker sitting by us asked, "Have you tried violating her?" Thought he was an okay guy, but not after that line. The day he was fired was a good day. Follow-up. He had only worked there about 2 months. Didn't talk much, so that was a pretty messed up first comment to a private conversation. I think, or hope, he was trying to be funny. He was fired about 9 days later. No reason was given to the rest of the crew. The boss just said, "Greg has been let go." How he was not fired for that comment, though. Story 13. One summer back in high school, I had a crush on this girl and we'd hang out when we weren't working together. A friend of mine would keep insisting that I should just ask her out. So I mustered my courage and asked her out. Yeah, it was a glorious fail. I still remember when she smiled and told me the truth. That was when I found out that they had been secretly dating for a year and thought it would be a lark to just mess with me. 100 to 0 in a few words and a vicious smile. Like that. Except my friend kept insisting that I lose my virginity to my boyfriend, who she was secretly smashing the entire time. We dated, and they thought it would be funny if he took my V card. Story 14. She accused my dad of physically shaming and assaulting her at a sleepover. Went to court, and after the first day of trial, she admitted she made it up because she was jealous of my relationship with my parents. Meanwhile, my dad's legal bill was $17,000, and her family immediately filed for bankruptcy a week after, so we couldn't pursue them civilly. They were legit poor, so wouldn't have made a difference. Comes out later she had done the same thing before. She's been married, divorced, and the kicker is her current common-law husband is her ex-husband's friend's father. Heinous. Story 15. Talking to my then-girlfriend about her cheating on me. Explaining I couldn't ever possibly trust her again, and she replied, "But do you really need to trust me?" Clearly had different ideas on what's required for a healthy relationship. For context, relationship was 6 years long. We had been talking about marriage. We owned a dog together. This was the second instance of cheating. This conversation was what pushed me over the edge into the territory of self-respect. Broke up with her the next day. Much happier since. Story 16. My best friend back in school got an F from the teacher. He and I asked if we could go to the toilet. I go to the toilet to text a bit with friends from another school. He goes to the parking lot and scratches the teacher's car. School break, and the teacher finds his car. We both get called to the director, etc., etc. Friend said that we both scratched the car. I showed the teacher my phone to show him I was texting and couldn't have scratched his car, told my friend to take off, and went out. The benefits of constant texting. Story 17. When my best friend of 10 years slept with my boyfriend of 2 years. I was so crushed, but to be honest, I was more angry with the friend. I truly did believe that I was deeply in love with the boyfriend, but he was kind of a butthead to begin with. I saw my friend as a sister, and her betrayal left a longer-lasting impact and hurt way more. I hated her in a violent way for a very long time. Fast forward 11 years, and now I'm to a point where I've forgiven her and wish her well, but would never let her back into my life again. Story 18. My ex-girlfriend. We were childhood sweethearts. Dated from 17 to 25. Found out she was cheating on me with her boss, who was more than twice our age. Then proceeded to find out there were many more occurrences and she was a very different person than the one I'd been dating. Shattered. That's almost exactly my story, but I didn't find out until I was 30. Story 19. Gave my roommate an envelope with a money order for bills in it to drop in the mail. He got arrested. While looking for some of his documents to take to him, I found the opened, empty envelope in his closet. Peace out. Hey, I was looking for your stuff, but all I found was another charge the police can pile on top. Story 20. My mother fought cancer for 5 years. My father let my sister and I do 95% of the work/caregiving, and after her passing, expected us to step into her place and take care of him. The man I used to love and respect is gone, and I can't stand to be around him anymore. There can be some serious burnout after the death of a loved one for whom you're a caregiver. Please, take care of yourself. Story 21. When my grandfather screamed at my mother that she had ruined his life by being born. Never spoke to him again after that. Dang. And my grandpa told my uncle that he was praying for hardship to enter his life so he could get closer to God. My uncle is probably going to have open heart surgery soon. So, awesome dad. Story 22. I still love playing Pokemon, and I had no female friends with the same interest. Found out about this group of guys that played it after school. Got really excited and made plans with them. I waited for hours and they never showed up. The next day, I overheard my best childhood friend laughing about how annoying I was and that they had to hide from me to play in peace. That really hurt. Story 23. The first girl I ever dated passed away unexpectedly on my then current girlfriend and my 3-year anniversary. My then girlfriend stated she was ticked because my ex had passed away on purpose that day because it was our anniversary. I was utterly disgusted, and it completely changed how I viewed her altogether. Things fell apart shortly after, and we broke up. Holy hell, that is so horrible of her. Hope you're doing better now. Story 24. My best friend, who I considered a brother, was working for me. I called him to talk about the next job, construction, and he informed me that he had started his own company and took my other full-time employee with him, who was working with me that day. Yeah, needless to say, that one stung for a bit. We're cordial now, but it will never be the same after that. It's been 3 years. Story 25. I didn't have a good relationship with my family, and my in-laws were incredible. They would help out whenever and however they could. Then my daughter, elementary school aged at the time, told me that my father-in-law had physically shamed her. I can't even comprehend this. I'm so sorry. Story 26. When he started being condescending to me in almost every conversation we have, in about almost every topic we talked about, then he complained to me that some people can't handle him having such strong opinions on topics he's passionate about. Story 27. Found out this girl I was getting close to had been lying about her ex being a deadbeat dad and, well, her ex. He wasn't just still in the picture. They lived together. I should have guessed after the 3rd or 4th time she made an excuse to not go to her place. Never ended something so quick. Story 28. My brand new stepmother screamed at me in public because she had left her purse at their wedding venue. I, an 11-year-old, was supposed to have known somehow to keep an eye on it for her. I didn't hate her right away, but that was definitely a switch flip moment on how I felt about her. Story 29. A former friend bailed on me when we were supposed to hang out, and so I called my then girlfriend to see what she was doing, and I could hear him talking to her parents in the background. Dang, sorry, man. Story 30. When my partner passed away, I looked at his parents and felt so sad for them. The way I felt. Then the next day, they basically told me to get lost and took everything of his from our home. Oh, and changed the funeral date so I couldn't go. Yeah, there's grief and there's downright evil. Story 31. As fast as it took for his wife to call me at work to tell me that he was not only married, but had 3 children, including a newborn. That is brutal. Sorry. Story 32. My childhood friend lived pretty close to me and seemed like a nice dude until he stole my GoldenEye and moved to Minnesota. Curse you, Derek. Yeah, curse you, Derek. Story 33. when he convinced his wife to kick her young kids out because they, the husband and wife, were finally having a child together. He was very open about hating his stepkids.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.